Coogs house, the Houston Cougars return Jojo Tugler and set up what might be a historic 2025-2026 season.
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs, the daily podcast all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. Whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to step by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Be sure to make your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say as we approach holiday weekend of sorts, Easter weekend for those celebrating, tell us if you're more of a turkey or a ham, or what's your holiday protein of choice in your household. We're looking to change it up a little bit over here. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We got more on that fun later, because the fun right now is that Jojo Tugler is returning. I want to talk about this saga and what's going on with that in the first segment. Second segment, I want to look at what this means for next year's roster and how historic that team could be. Last but not least, we got to talk about some other Houston Cougar returning / potentially looking at other things kind of news in the third and final segment. That's not so surprising, so we got to make sure we touch on. But first, foremost, Jojo Tugler, and a rather dramatic announcement, is coming back to Houston. We got to see that new hashtag for the campaign, Wide Awake, playing off of the head coach Kelvin Sampson's statement after the Final Four win about don't sleep on Houston, and the hashtag being Wide Awake as they're looking to run it back next year. Jojo Tugler, the formal announcement was at 3 o'clock Central Time on Wednesday afternoon. They kind of, I think, had a lot of people in the dark, but they tweeted earlier in the day, big announcement coming at 3 o'clock. And I was like, wait a second, what's that mean? Coach turns 70 next year. Is there something problematic happening? What's going on? And it was, of course, the outlining of the first commitment back to the campaign. Houston did this a year ago with the Run It Back campaign, with a bunch of guys committing back to Houston. Got to take the NIL dollars and that kind of thing and have their end of season exit interviews with Samp and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, Tugler's coming back, and based on what you're seeing, NIL agents of Portland and Gosling being at the front end of it, it does sound like there were obviously people talking to Jojo Tugler. And I think there are a lot of people that thought this was a gigantic nothing burger when Tugler recommitted to Houston on Wednesday. And I'm here to tell you that that's not the case. First of all, I don't have a whole lot of conversations with Jojo about what he did and didn't hear. I can tell you on a very surface level, though, there are a lot of programs that were eager to get into his DMs and on his phone line trying to get a hold of the guy. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to look across even just the Big 12 and see what's going on in college basketball. Baylor has lost their entire roster. Graduations aside, BYU lost 3 different starters to the transfer portal. UCF lost 6 non-seniors. Arizona lost 3 non-seniors, all of which were in the rotation, a couple starters. Cincinnati lost 9. West Virginia lost their whole roster. College basketball is becoming all about turnover, and one of the things that Houston's doing well is, by and large, keeping guys year over year. Now, a lot of this has to do with NIL dollars. The biggest numbers out there consistently, at least in the Big 12, being BYU. Darian Williams may end up getting an offer from BYU and going there in the transfer portal. Darian Williams being from Texas Tech, transferring within the conference to BYU. Different numbers out there on him. Does sound like they're going to get Rob Wright. They got a commitment out of Rob Wright, the former, I think it was a 5-star, maybe it was a 4-star point guard out of Baylor. I think he's getting $3.5 million reportedly to get to BYU. AJ Demansa famously was rumored everywhere between $5 and $9 million. The 5-star #1 player in America freshman next season. BYU's got money to throw at people, right? And they're throwing money around. There are plenty of people that would have thrown a lot of money at Jojo Tugler. And he's not playing for free at Houston out of the good of his heart. I don't mean to say like that. Houston's finding ways to get these things done. Shouts to Gosling, shouts to Lincoln Coogs, shouts to all the people involved in that. But this is extremely rare to see in college basketball. And I want to stress that a lot because I think way too many people saw what happened in Tugler recommitting to Houston as some sort of a foregone conclusion. And a year ago, I was trying to tell you that there's no such thing as foregone conclusions. And ultimately, Houston returned all of their roster. This year, they lost Terrence Arsenault, right? That it's just the way it goes sometimes. And Jojo Tugler is the best defensive player on the best defensive team in America last year. He didn't win the Naismith Defense Player of the Year award. He won other Defense Player of the Year awards and was a finalist for the Naismith. It's at 6'8", the 7'6" wingspan is well documented. The impact on the floor is well documented. And we'll talk more about how that impacts the historical upside of next year's front court in the second segment. But really, I want to stress that his phone was going to be blowing up, and frankly, it was probably to some degree already blowing up just at the mere thought that there may be a chance he leaves Houston. And credit to Tugler for being high on the Coogs and high on coming back and high on doing this thing the old-fashioned way. Again, I'm not saying he's playing for free. Lincoln Coogs doing a good job taking care of the guys, continue to do a great job taking care of the guys. But this is a big deal. Tugler has been committed to Houston since, honestly, early in his high school career when his only other offers were Georgia Southern and Lamar. He's a guy that Houston spotted early as a guy that fit what they're doing. And he, frankly, I think values that as much as Houston values him. I think that's an important factor here, right? Sampson and company saw him early in the process and identified him early in the process as guys they could project forward with this program becoming the national powerhouse that it is becoming, right? I also think it's worth pointing out that his direct report of sorts as far as assistant coaches go is Kellen Sampson. So when there's talk about, Kelvin turns 70 next year, and it's like, yeah, but Kellen's going to get the reins, and that's who Jojo works with as a forward most directly. Jojo's got room to grow. I don't mean to say that he's a perfect player by any stretch. Basically, every offensive category outside of putback dunks is something you could argue he needs to work on, right? Man, if he get the Javier Francis footwork glow up over the offseason, that would be tremendous. But I say that to say that he's got things to work on, and that's why he's not going to the NBA draft and that kind of stuff, as good a defensive player as he is. And what's interesting, in talking in DMs to a couple different NFL and NBA draft people, it sounds like there's a lot of intrigue in him as moldable clay at the NBA level, meaning they see the defense. Frankly, he'll get away with a lot more on defense at that level as far as fouls and stuff goes. They also get an extra foul every game. You'll also see a lot of people think about him as a switching four that can play the small ball five, do a lot of stuff around the rim. NBA teams are more often going to have a five that can stretch out and shoot the three, which means he gets more in the roam inside the paint kind of area. There are a lot of people intrigued by the unteachable stuff Jojo does, and at the NBA level, willing to teach him the teachable stuff. He still has a second round grade, though, because his offensive game is still, coming along in that way. And so coming back to Houston, not even entertaining the combine and that kind of stuff, he knows what he needs to work on. It's not like he needs to go talk to a bunch of scouts about it. It's very clear, right? And so he's going to show it back at Houston next year. We keep hearing about him working on threes in the offseason. He shot a dozen or something like that last year in the course of games. I don't know that he's going to add that in a full force kind of way by 2025, 2026. But I do think you'll see more offensive game with him catching the ball and doing more than just a pound dribble hook shot kind of stuff. Again, if he could get to where he had that reliable hook like Juwan Roberts had, that would be awesome. If he got to where he had anything like what Carlton had years ago, man, that'd be awesome. If he gets to where Javier Francis got to by his own junior year, right, and where he had the footwork down pat kind of like that, he'd be elite. And so we'll see where that offensive game goes. We know defensively he is the anchor. He is coming back. And man, oh man, I'm telling you that this is a big deal. And I think that everyone's like, of course he's coming back. Does not. That's such a misunderstanding of what happens in college basketball right now. You got guys going to 4 schools in 4 years, if not more. What was the kid that made it West Virginia that was at South Dakota and then started off he went to from there to Iowa for a hot second, was there a week before also getting back in the portal, and now he's going to West. just these guys move around so much, and Tugler is so desirable that he's coming back to Houston is a big deal. It's a big deal because it makes a fairly historic front court, and I want to talk some about that front court. But before we get too far into the proceedings and get down to what that looks like, I do want to remind you that today's show is brought to you by our buddies over at Upwork. Now, scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, more experts ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with the top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. I got to say, the biggest thing to me is they find affordable top-tier freelancers. That's a big deal for your business as you're kind of growing it and scaling it upwards. Does it very efficiently. Visit Upwork.com right now and post out for free at Upwork. That's UPWORK.com, Upwork.com, to connect with the top talent and grow your business today. Locked on Coogs here, host Parker Ainsworth, talking about Jojo Tugler returning to the Coogs. And okay, full disclosure, I saw someone tweet this out, and I thought it was a really clever thought experiment. And I think Jojo Tugler might make this, it definitely makes this the best front court since Phi Slamma Jamma. And I feel like we're going to be talking about this front court for a long, long time. That is Jojo Tugler starting at the 5, and Chris Cenac, the 5-star, projected top 10 pick freshman, coming up and playing the 4. I say that even though Cenac is taller, his game extends out wider. We'll talk about their pairing in a second, but I think that's how they would pair up technically, although really they're kind of interchangeable on the defensive side. The front courts, I think, that are comparable here, and I know this is high praise. 84, Hakeem Olajuwon, Ricky Winslow. 83, Akeem Larry Michaud also was pretty strong. I kind of liked 84 and Winslow, but I also might have just been partial to Phi Slamma Jamma's version of Ricky Winslow. Anyway, I think that somewhere in there is going to be a comparable front court. You got to go back to 68. Before that, 68 had Elvin Hayes and Ken Spain, which was 2 centers playing, which actually feels a lot like what's happening here. My grandfather, rest his soul, would have probably told you about Elvin Hayes and Melvin Bell being the better option, actually. But either way, that's what you're looking at, right? And I think there's a real chance here that obviously it would involve cutting down nets on a Monday in April. And we were so close a year ago, or so close a couple weeks ago, feels like a year. It's been so long. We're so close just a few days ago, right? And so I think that where this program goes is like, if this program cuts down nets, it will be talked about like that. No, I don't think it's fair to do the Akeem Olajuwon comparison from a pro sense. There was a top whatever guy all time. I think he's probably higher than most. I'd put him in the top 10, but I'm admittedly a little biased. That's all pro career and later. His college years, you remember, Hakeem was a little bit different, a little bit rawer, but definitely like leaps and bounds more athletic than everyone he was playing. So that balance kind of changes things up a little bit. Again, if you read the book Dream by Marion Fader, it's a great job of outlining that, and a whole portion of the book's about Phi Slamma. Tugler, though, last year had the best defensive rating in all of college basketball. Like, it wasn't particularly close. The defensive box score, meaning his plus minus with him on the floor versus off the floor, he led the Big 12 at 9.8. He led all of the Big 12 in block percentage. If you look at every analytical category about when he's on the floor and not on the floor, Houston was the best defense without him on the floor in America, and still leaps and bounds better with him on the floor, right? That's how dramatic his impact is. It's not that they had a bad defense like that. I don't mean to make light of that, but they were still leaps and bounds better than the best defense in America when Jojo was on the floor. Point blank, he forced his way into the starting lineup over a fourth-year senior with a lot of minutes and a full year of starting a year ago under his belt in Javier Francis, right? His defensive impact was just too strong. You stay in the game, stay out of foul trouble, and frankly, there's a decent argument to be had about had he stayed out of foul trouble in the championship game, it might not have ever been a 2-point game down the stretch, right? That's not today's argument. It's one that hurts my heart a little bit. But truthfully, that's, I think, the only way he needs to get any better defensively is play a little cleaner, because you don't want him to play less intense, right? Offensively, going to keep growing. We talked about that some in the first segment. But the way that this becomes the best front court in maybe program history, if not at least over 40 years, is he pairs with Chris Cenac. Chris Cenac comes in as a 5-star, projected one and done. He's a projected top 10 next year's NBA draft kind of freshman. And the deal here is how well those two games pair up. This is chocolate and peanut butter. I mean, these are two things that are supposed to go together. Jojo Tugler, aggressive on offense, attacks on the rim, catching lobs, single dribbles, up and under, right, and dunks and dunks and dunks and dunks, right? Handful of little right-hand flip hooks and stuff like that, but ultimately, the dude just power and aggression. Chris Cenac has power and aggression, but is smooth. He's able to dribble, able to pull out and face up, able to look at the basket from 15 feet and make a couple moves, make a couple change of direction kind of things. Really, really great on the perimeter for a guy his size at his age. I think his best move is the way he uses his length on the jab and rip through. He really does a great job. If you're a football person, of like, receiver gets the DB on his hip and leaves, he does that really, really well in that jab step rip through kind of stuff. Love his face-up game. He's got a decent jump shot. And frankly, his free throw percentage kind of stuff indicates like he'll continue to get better as a jump shooter the more reps he gets and stuff like that. Cenac is able to play the power forward 4 spot. You could go small ball with him at the 5 and a 5 out, but I think he'll pair with Jojo as a 4 that can play on the perimeter. Not horribly unlike Jarris Walker, maybe not quite the 3-point shooter Jarris was, but Jarris also didn't take as many when he was a freshman at Houston. Right, that's kind of the guy we're looking at here, though, is he's smooth, he's long, he does all those kinds of things well. I'm intrigued by, at Link, he played, Link's a top-end academy kind of program, and he got to kind of show off some of his passing abilities when he got there. I think you'll see a lot of that this year with shooters. Obviously, Isaiah Harwell is a shooter coming in. Emanuel Sharp will be a shooter coming back. We'll talk about that in a second. If Milos gets out of the draft and comes back as well, Pops Isaac, you got a whole lot of guys that can even distribute the ball around with and shoot pretty well. I think that'll open him up as a passer. I can't wait to see, though, and the way this pairing could actually end up comparable to Hakeem and Winslow or Hayes and Spain or whatever, right? I can't wait to see the big-to-big passing with Cenac at that 15-foot, the nail, the high post kind of area. I thought Jarris was really good at that. I thought Jawan was really good at that. Cenac has the same kind of ability, and he's taller. He sees over the defenses a little bit. And because of where Tugler plays on defense, you're going to see Cenac with a lot of favorable size matchups, because he's going to pull his guy out away from the rim in a way that Tugler's not. So you're going to have to put the big bruiser types on Tugler. I think this pairing is really, really great. That's not to say you're not going to see great minutes from Sacco or anybody else coming off the bench as the bigs in this at all. I'm intrigued by what McFarland brings. I was really high on him. Thought his offense game was really polished coming out of high school as well. But I really think that you'll see Cenac and Tugler as a starting front court in what might be one of the best in a very illustrious basketball program's history. And this past season was special. Memories that I will never forget and you will never forget. We shared a lot of those things together through this show and just through getting to watch that basketball team play. Next year's group has a chance to be really special too. And this pairing is a big, big part of that. We're talking about it all off season long. And we'll talk about where else they fit in and who else fits where. I mentioned some other freshmen that are going to kind of help make this thing go. But before we get too far into one guy that's going to help make this thing go in a second, and kind of what's going on with him as of late, that's one Emanuel Sharp. And what's going on with him, we'll get into that in 1 second. Before we get to all that, I did tell you at the top that today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. That's America's #1 sportsbook, because the NBA playoffs are almost here, and the Rockets are in them. FanDuel's giving away new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Put down your first $5 bet. If that bet hits, you get $250 back in bonus bets. You get the Rockets or the Warriors, and they do it. That's $250 back in bonus bets. I love how easy this app is. I love how fast the payouts are. I love in-game, live game action at all times. After the game tips off, you can combine live prop bets into a same-game parlay for a chance to win really, really big. Don't miss out. Head over to FanDuel.com, claim your $250 in bonus bets today. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Parker Rangers, Locked On Coogs here. Talking about Houston and the Houston basketball program rebuilding heading into next season and maybe building up the team that was about 65 seconds away from a national championship into an even better team. Yes, that's right. There's a chance this team is even better. We talked about Jojo Tugler coming back and being a big, big part of that. Interesting news on Wednesday evening was Paper City, I think, was the first to have it. I may be wrong there, but Emanuel Sharp is going to be dabbling in the NBA waters. He has not said he's transferring out. He's not put his name in the transfer portal. If he comes back to college, it sounds like he probably will. He will be coming back to Houston. It sounds like, in reading the reporting by Paper City that talked to Derek Sharp, Emanuel's father, as well as Emanuel briefly, Emanuel's going to head to the NBA Combine and get some of that feedback we talked about the other day with Milo Suzanne. Remember, they have their Combine goes from May 11th to the 18th, and then the kids have from the 18th to the 28th to ultimately choose they want to come back to the NCAA or head off to the pros. Emanuel has indicated no thing outside of coming back to Houston, which is important. Remember, a few years back, Tremont Mark used this as his chance to also transfer. Sharp has not indicated anything like that. And I understand wanting the feedback. And frankly, his feedback, Emanuel Sharp's feedback, is a little bit different than JoJo's, and that's going to be a little bit more nuanced. What are you going to work on is maybe not as obvious for a guy that shot over 40% from three, led Houston scoring a lot, was most outstanding player of the Big 12 tournament of the regional they were in, getting through the Sweet 16, Elite 8 and all that, right? Emanuel, well, I think, unfortunately, a lot is going to be put on the last play of the season. Emanuel had an incredible year, played through injuries, and was a big part of the reason that this team was even in the national championship game, let alone had a chance to win it. And I think that it was eye-opening in that article to hear, like, Emanuel is kind of wearing this still, wearing the stench of that still. And ultimately, I don't know that it was necessarily Houston Cougar fans. I can't imagine people that follow this program throughout the entire season doing this, but, there's all kinds of taunting and chaos and whatever online around a college kid that, had a bad couple plays there at the end of a basketball game on national television. And ultimately, that I think can get to you. And I think that was interesting to hear, like, he's getting through it. It didn't sound like he's over it. As mentally tough as Emanuel is, I think it's very natural for it to be getting to anybody a little bit, but he's getting through it. And I don't mean to jump to conclusions and this, that, and the other thing, but in a day where in college sports, we're talking a lot about mental health and athletes, it's nice to hear that he's getting through it, but also disappointing to hear that it ever got as bad as it did. And so, first of all, this probably never gets to Emanuel, but I want to let Emanuel know that, like, obviously this show's a big fan of his. I'm a big fan of his. Most Houston Cougar fans are gigantic fans of his. I think he's got one of the coolest stories of anyone in the program right now. And I'm excited to see him come back to Houston with some, improvements and notes how to continue to grow his game. Doesn't need fixing, but how to grow his game. I think the other thing is that, assuming he gets the feedback and comes back to Houston and doesn't get told he's got a first-round grade or something like that, because I don't think he will at this point in his career, he's going to be really important to next year's team too. He's the lone senior that has spent his career at Houston next year. Miles Uzan is a big part of this culture, and if he opts out of the NBA, I should make sure I say that clearly. If he opts out of the NBA and comes back to Houston, he'll be a senior. He transferred in from Oklahoma last year, right? You've got, top end players, Kingston, Fleming, Isaiah Harwell, Chris Cenac. Those guys are all probably NBA players before they can legally drink. That doesn't mean that they're not young, right? That doesn't mean that they're not weathered through the kinds of things that Emanuel has been, right? Popeye is going to be an important part of next year's program. He's a great scorer. I mean, a great scorer. And I really get excited when I think about like the way LJ Cryer grew and the way Pop Isaacs will grow at Houston as well. And he's an older guy, been through some stuff at Tech, been through some stuff as a college basketball player, right? It wasn't at Houston or in this culture like it was for Emanuel. Same with Sacco. Khalif Sacco is a really good college basketball player with a lot of games under his belt. They haven't been at Houston. Emanuel's the guy. If you go back and look at that freshman class with Jarris Walker, now in the NBA, Terrence Arsenault, now in the transfer portal, it's Emanuel. And we're seeing that play out now where he is assuming that he gets the feedback, comes back to Houston. He's the senior that has been through all of those roller coaster of years. The highs of being the one in the country several times over that span, the highs of being an number one seed, the lows of the injuries to important players in crucial moments, the lows of being the guy with the ball in your hands and you make a mistake at the end of the game. He's had both of those sets of things happen to him. And this team kind of needs that kind of a leader. He's going to be important to what this group does next year. His story is not done at Houston by any stretch, assuming he doesn't get a first-round grade or something like that out of this combine ordeal. And I'm excited to get to see it continue to be written and get to talk to you about it as it continues to unfold. But ultimately, it's kind of important that he's a part of this Houston team. And hearing that he's going to do the combine thing, I guess once I thought it through, like I said, it's the kind of thing where his feedback is not as obvious as JoJo's. I would have probably projected 48 hours ago that JoJo would dabble in the NBA combine, get his feedback, and come back, and Emanuel would have been the sure thing, coming back, no questions asked, right? JoJo understands what he has to work on. It's very obvious. Emanuel doesn't quite, because I'd imagine they'll tell him things about attacking the rim more, using his body more, getting to the foul line more. Because personally, that's when I think he's at his best. I'm not an NBA scout, but that's when I think he's at his best. I did put some questions out there to the guys I talked to about that kind of stuff, and we'll see what they get back to me with on what they think he should work on whenever he makes his final decision, which I would imagine is May 19th or 20th. We'll see what they say, and we'll see what – I'm sure he'll have something to say about it. But, man – it's not a very big chance, but the chance that he's gone is kind of scary. It's just a little scary. Now, again, this team is very talented with or without Emanuel. I just think his leadership is going to be really, really important on top of all the talent they've got and the talent that he's got. And we're following, like I said, each and every day here as more unfolds at Locked on Coogs. So hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know when we are live, being every day and checking out back with us every single morning. Locked on Coogs is a prime member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, our Jojo Tugler's team, Emanuel Sharp's team, every single day. Go Coogs.